I'm going to say something that is going to piss some people off, but it's something that needs to be said. Marvel Studios is getting a bad reputation now. What used to be the most beloved successful studio of all time, making some of the biggest hits of the last decade. Every single Marvel movie that came out was a surefire hit, and no movie had a chance of competing with IT. It's safe to say nowadays Marvel is no longer that studio. Today they are lucky if they even break even, with their more recent films making less and less money and becoming less popular with critics and audiences, sometimes outright hating Marvel nowadays and thinking it's gone to shit. But in my opinion, this isn't a new thing. Marvel was always bad from the very first movie. Let me explain. There are times when a franchise is so good and all the elements are as good and they're able to stay good throughout the years. But some franchises have such shitty elements that IT can start off good and be well received for a while, but eventually those shitty elements begin to show and the cracks start to get bigger and bigger, and what used to be ignored because you thought the product was so good becomes such an issue. IT begins to overpower your positive thoughts about IT, and that's exactly what's happening with the MCU. It's always had this issue, even when the MCU was at its peak. I never liked IT. When everyone was praising them I was like, I just don't get IT. And the reason why I think the MCU has never worked is the tone. Since we were talking about a comic book cinematic universe, IT should exclude the zany nature of a comic book, but films like Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War and even Spider-Man Homecoming are way too dark and grounded. Now I'm not saying they should have gone full zany, cause it would make things too silly and not relatable, but have a balance of both comic book energy mixed in with some down-to-earth drama. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies are the perfect example of that. They have the same energy that the Spidey comics have, but they also have some real drama in every movie. That makes the world both enjoyable and fun but also realistic and genuine. The MCU eventually tried some outlandish zany stuff in films Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man and the last two Thor movies, and that's why some of those are my favorite MCU movies. Because they actually make the universe fun and enjoyable for once, where it's usually very politics-centric and very Michael Bay-ish. But by then IT was too late because the tone for the MCU was already set in everyone's minds, and everyone WHO watched the MCU, wanted IT to be like that, and if IT wasn't then they wouldn't want anything to do with IT. They would say it's gone downhill or it's missing that stuff that hooked us to IT in the first place. But in my opinion IT did start to get better after Endgame, and I know everyone is going to disagree with me on that, but I don't care. I watched the MCU for films like Ant-Man and the Wasp, not Captain America Civil War. I even liked Quantumania, but unfortunately even Marvel couldn't help but let me down when the Marvels debuted on November 10th. I was the only one in my theater that went to see this movie, and while the visuals were amazing, the movie itself was a complete mess. IT felt like IT was rushed, and they didn't take the time to fix anything. They just threw IT out as fast as they could and hoped that people wouldn't care and go see IT anyway. Well, IT obviously didn't work. Nobody went to see this movie, because they knew IT would be a total waste of time and money. IT was a movie that pleased no one. IT didn't please the MCU fans that stuck IT with IT since Phase 1. IT didn't please the Golden Age MCU fans that loved Phase 1 to 3 and after that left. IT didn't even please me, and I'm very easy to please. I liked Quantumania for fuck's sake. It's not a good sign when you think Quantumania is a better structured film than the Marvels. Overall guys, the MCU has always had its problems. IT introduced a tone that IT had to stick to, otherwise IT was trashed. IT took way too long to actually emulate the style of a comic book, and for the most part was treated like a Michael Bay franchise, and never thought about how all this could eventually make IT collapse upon itself and ruin any credibility IT had as a franchise and as a studio. I think the MCU is on its way out after Secret Wars, unless they can come up with a new way to tell stories with these characters. I don't know they were going to keep IT going. The only thing that could be interesting is if Marvel did animated movies that could really express that comic book zaniness and tell a relatable story that could grab audiences' attention. The Spider-Verse movies have proven that IT can work, and they have been very successful as well as the talk of the comic book town. Imagine if Marvel opened an animation studio and we got an animated Iron Man movie, Captain America movie, Thor movie, or even a good X-Men or Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And this could really help IT deviate from DC, since they were doing Elseworlds movies and people have been asking Marvel to do the same thing. Why not do that with animation? IT would certainly be interesting and maybe get an audience coming back to you. Anyways guys, what do you think of the MCU? Do you like IT or dislike IT? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you next time.